Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Courtney Staples, and yes, this means that Rob is not with us today, which might come as a bit of a shock. But with me is Daniel Quinn, as well as our friend Jon Parsons. And Jon, I know you just did this on our latest patron-exclusive Aphid Lounge episode, but could you tell our listeners a bit about who you are?
Hey, everybody. My name is Jon Parsons. I sometimes go by the stage name Johnny Law. As you will see on our show, which will be released sometime, called Dungeons and Flagons. I am a semi-retired restaurateur. I was in the service industry for over 2 decades and liked making boozy drinks and impeccable wine lists, if I may say so myself. I currently live out in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, where I tend to a very heavily wooded yard and 2 dogs. And I love all things RPG and world building related.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you on for a regular episode this time.
My pleasure. I hope I don't drop the ball. It's got some big shoes to occupy, you know.
We believe in you.
All right, thank you.
Did you arrive intoxicated? Because that's one of the requirements.
See, it's the problem with doing these earlier morning things. Like I'm barely caffeinated. I'm on second cup now.
Daniel, meanwhile, is on his third cocktail.
That's right.
Ready to go.
Lucille Ball.
You gotta get the upswing from that cocaine crash he's having right now. So.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Also, do you mean Lucille Bluth?
I did mean Lucille Bluth, but I bet Lucille Ball was also an alcoholic.
Just assume every celebrity probably has some issues there. Anyway, on today's episode, we're going to be doing a new world building prompt from a first-time submitter. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that if you'd like us to build your world, you can go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the send prompt link and follow the instructions. And within a somewhat reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we're over on Twitter @Let'sWorldBuild. And if you'd like to chat with us more directly and connect with other listeners, you can join our Discord server. There's a link for that in the description and on our website. If you're feeling particularly generous and would like to support the podcast, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/worldbuildwithus or follow the link in the description and on our site. If you become a patron, you'll get benefits like early access to episodes, bonus clips that don't make it into the final cuts for various reasons, 2-episode world builds for the prompts that you submit to us instead of just one-parters, and patron-exclusive episodes, like, for example, the one that Jon was just on about communication and collaboration in role-playing games. So if any of that sounds appealing, or if you'd like to check out the full list of benefits at different tiers, be sure to visit our Patreon. And of course, a huge thank you to all of our patrons for your ongoing support. We really do appreciate it. And now, with my first ever introduction spiel to the podcast complete, let's dive into this new prompt from our new listener, Sunji. Sunji, thanks so much for listening and for submitting this prompt. It's always really exciting for us to get one from someone new. And the prompt reads, a race of people evolve with crystal microchips in their brains that store all their memories in the form of audio. This effectively gives them perfect memory of everything they hear. When they die, their crystals remain. Over the years, those crystals accumulate and start resonating with each other to form a type of neural network. In the modern world, this phenomenon is studied and harnessed for technological advancements. And there's just one tenet for us this time, which is that the crystals carry the memories of the individual, but not their personality. So this is a pretty cool prompt that gives us a lot of leeway with the world overall, and I'm very curious to see where we end up taking it. And Jon, as our guest, could you please start us off with your first tenet?
Alrighty. Yeah, very open-ended. I usually like working with a bit more constraints when I'm doing something for the first time, so this will be interesting. So my first tenet, I'm thinking, and I'm going to start a little broad because I want you guys to help me kind of mold this idea, and I don't want to put too many constraints on things, but because they have these perfect memories of everything they've ever heard, so I assume that in their head they narrate things and that gets recorded, but that's going to be skewed obviously to what they're thinking or what they want to think. But everything they heard is going to be pretty much objective information,
Mhm.
except when taking extremely out of context. And because of that, over the years, what I think has happened, or over the generations and maybe millennia, is that their eyesight has started to fade. This race of
Oh.
peoples,
Oh.
because people, we as humans we're built around creating our world from our eyesight first and foremost. But this race of people, because they're anything that's audio related is recorded perfectly, that's become the basis of their reality.
Mhm.
And so just as an evolutionary, like eyesight just became less useful, and it started dwindling. So I'm not saying they're necessarily mole people, but like leaning towards that kind of concept.
Ooh.
And like maybe they actually picked up other senses to replace their eyesight, like kind of like Toph from Airbender, Avatar.
Mhm.
I like that. It's like the whole set of the people rather than some subgroup, perhaps. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I think it's like just like a natural, and like maybe our hero or something, like maybe they had a genetic defect or something that allowed them to have eyesight. I don't know. I didn't really play with that idea in my
Mm.
head yet, but just I think as a society as a whole, especially as throughout the generations, as a society got tighter, and I guess you start accumulating more of these crystals. I think that kind of works in the same concept too. That like they start have this overhead of all these crystals and this knowledge stored, that they stop,
Mhm.
their eyesight just started failing because it's like all the fish deep down in the oceans, like they don't need eyesight because it's dark as hell down there. So they developed other ways to navigate the world.
I know you said mole people, but what about bat people?
I mean, I'm not against bat people, that's for sure.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I don't know about if they would have sonar or it'd be more like a tremor
Mhm.
sense kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting.
Why? What interests you about bat people, Courtney? Besides the blood?
Oh, I mean, I swear it doesn't have to do with vampires. No,
Yeah.
I swear. No, it's more that just the idea of sonar popped into my head when you were talking about, relying on
Oh.
auditory stuff. But I do also like the idea of the tremor sense with mole people, and maybe there's like different groups of people, so it depends on like where they're located that they've sort of evolved over time to focus on different senses.
That also, when you said the sonar bit, I just thought, like, I wonder if it'd be a form of assault if you made like a really horrible noise
Oh.
to someone and
Mhm.
it just
Oh,
Oh
like
yeah.
stuck in their head, or
yeah.
like,
Uh-huh.
if you put an earworm, just a really bad song into someone's head, and then they remember that forever.
Are we saying then that these people are blind? Like, can we take it to that step rather than degrees of visibility?
I think like legally blind, yes. I don't know
Yeah.
if they not have eyes. Like, is it that harsh, or is it just
I
like
don't
it's
know.
very very poor eyesight?
What do you think?
I'm fine either way.
Yeah. I like the
Hmm.
extremes. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, it could be really interesting. I'm curious how it'll interact with my first tenet.
Mo, let's hear it.
So, my idea was that there is a religious sect that, in order to live a more pure, unburdened life, they only communicate non-verbally, like through
Oh.
writing, sign language,
Oh,
visual art. But that definitely would shift if they're fully blind, or I guess even legally, it would be tough to communicate unless you're very, very close to somebody.
Unless they're not blind. That group in particular, like John was saying.
interesting.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Mhm. Although I don't know, then how would their art be appreciated by the ones who can't see? Maybe their art has to have a way to be translated to an auditory like sensation.
Mhm. Or like it's more of a touch thing, maybe like a
Oh yeah.
braille, but in the form of art, or you're dealing with textures and like sculpture instead of painting.
Vibrating sculptures and paintings.
Okay.
Ooh, like what if like that sand art that you do, or
Uh-huh.
you layer things? Like what if somehow they were able to interact because they can't see, they could feel the different textures?
That would be neat.
Yeah.
Or are we saying these people can see though?
I don't
Possibly.
know. What do you
Yeah, I
think?
guess we still haven't decided, yeah, like
Yeah.
how limited is that sense for them?
Because they're trying to get away from the sound, the fact that everything's recorded, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think
Mhm.
it's like a mindset that if they aren't constantly hearing things, that they will
Mhm.
somehow be more pure, and I don't know if that leads to their salvation in some way or if it's just a belief.
Is this more of an ancient religion, or is this more of a newer like shoot off, like a
Mhm.
cult that started?
I guess I didn't have an age in mind. I wasn't thinking like literal cult so much as
Mhm.
like a Buddhism type thing where
Okay.
they have sort of these temples that they live in and that are separate from the world where they can kind of live in silence.
So they reject society, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, more or less, I would say. Yeah.
I mean, I would say take it step further. So make them totally blind, right? And maybe they only communicate through these sculptural, tactile things that have, I don't know, some either magical or technological vibrational component that lets people
Mhm.
who can't, the others communicate. Like that's how they can interpret it. Maybe. I mean, that
Interesting.
you could push it all the way. Then it's like, okay, we're dealing with a society that can't see, which is interesting.
Yeah. But I guess like they would still be as far as like navigation, they could still hear around them, even if they're
Mhm.
not like literally bat people, but they still have a sense of like my footsteps echo, so therefore
Yeah.
I know I'm in this hallway and stuff like that.
This seems like a philosophical thing for them.
Yeah, yeah.
What if these people were more bat people, whereas the normal populace is
Oh.
mole people? Because they're not speaking, they can actually they can use sound in a different way.
Oh, I see. So they're even more attuned to it.
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas
Okay.
everyone else in the world is they're so used to being inundated with sound and capturing it that that's why
Mhm.
they rely on their feeling of tremor sense. Whereas this sect, they've changed the tremor sense into a deeper line of communication instead of discovery of the world. Like they kind of inverted it. Does that make sense?
Could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. So what I'm thinking is, and feel free to shoot this down, is the majority of the world, they
Mhm.
hear things, they record them, they store them forever in their head, perfect memories. So
Mhm.
because of that, they've given up on sight because sight's not as reliable. It can be used to kind of lie, whereas their sound, they know it to be true because they heard it.
Mhm.
And they navigate the world because they lack the sight with the feeling of, movement in the earth and whatnot, or disturbances of the airflow around them.
Mhm.
This sect has done the opposite, where they're trying to not hear sounds, they're quiet,
Mhm.
and instead they use movement to communicate with each other.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
because of that, they've developed almost a sense of sonar because sound is so rare for them,
Mhm.
or just it's not the same feeling.
Yeah, I do like that.
Have they removed their audio crystals? Is that what they've done?
Ooh.
Um, I didn't have that in mind. I'm not sure. Is it possible to remove them without
I don't know.
like
Is it?
dying?
Is
So
it?
you
Hmm.
evolve the crystal microchips in their brains.
Yeah,
So
right?
maybe
Yeah.
do they
So
like lobotomize themselves?
Okay.
that's my question. Like, is that what they're doing to not hear the sound?
It can involve lots of blood, Courtney.
I know. I know.
I don't want to lose sight of your art thing, though.
Yeah, and my
Hmm.
thought was like if they did lobotomize themselves by removing the microchip, like they wouldn't need to be quiet and like because they
Right.
would have
Oh
imperfect
yeah.
memories.
Mhm. Mhm.
Though I'm guessing there are probably people who have done that, or
That
it's
could be a
been shown
faction.
to people. Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
can work with that.
So we're saying no. We're gonna say that, like, to what you're saying, that they have their crystals.
Yeah, they still have them.
So the only question I have is,
Mhm.
I don't want to lose sight of the art component, right? Because originally you said they were visual art is what they produce, but
Yeah,
now
yeah.
nobody can really appreciate that directly. Like we're just like we're abandoning the visual component that you built into them. Like, is it satisfying that they produce these sculptural arts that are tactile, or do we want to go back and fix the visual bit?
I honestly do like the tactile aspect
Okay.
that we came up with, and I think if they can still see maybe to some extent, like maybe they can just see broad swaths of color or something like that rather than
Mhm.
distinct forms. But I do like the image of like a group of monks or priests or nuns like walking along a corridor and running their hands along
Yeah, that's what I
essentially
was
like
picturing.
a mural, but it's sculptural, it's all 3D, so they can just
Mhm.
feel what's going on, but they can't actually fully see it.
Okay.
I was going to say, what if they inadvertently made these extremely visually pleasing things through the
Mhm.
tactile? Like they don't know how beautiful
Mhm.
they are
Oh,
visually.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if either you want to, follow down later on with the path that someone was granted vision through genetic defect or something,
Mhm.
or if like an outside race visits this world
Mm.
and they're it's like it's obviously there's gonna be a lot of conflict that would happen with that, but maybe they find these people and they're like, holy shit, like these things are gorgeous.
Huh.
Yeah, and also thinking about, like, the sign language aspect that I mentioned, like,
Mm.
that wouldn't quite work out as a visual thing
Oh,
anymore.
right.
But if you think
Yeah.
about like Helen Keller, who was blind and deaf,
Mhm.
but she was able to do sign language, basically like holding other people's hands and like
Yeah.
signing into them and
Yeah.
feeling what people were doing. So it could be something like that, where in order to have like a intimate conversation, you have to like literally be holding hands with somebody or like signing
Aw.
on their body or something.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, those special handshakes, or
Yeah,
like
yes.
flapping back and
Yes.
forth.
It fits perfect for like a monastic order, so I think that
Mhm.
that works.
Yeah.
I like the intimacy of it too, though. Like I could
Mhm.
just picture these two people like sitting cross-legged across from each other and holding hands and taking turns talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very cute.
It is.
They can't talk over each other.
Yeah, that's or you just walk away from the other person when you're kind of
Yeah.
talking stuff.
Marzipan would like to one of my dogs would like to argue with that when I put my hand on her paw, she likes to put the other paw on top. So it's a game, so that'd be talking over each other.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's also interesting because, like, I assume that in regular society too, like, if you want something to remain very secret or you want to not remember something perfectly for whatever reason, like, you'd also probably try to communicate in an alternate non-verbal way.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, that would be tricky.
Yeah. Like, if it's I don't know, you, like, wanna say something that you for whatever reason, like, you don't want to remember yourself or don't want the other person to remember it fully or perfectly, like
If you just want to be in the moment, even.
yeah, like, maybe that's also, like, another intimacy thing where it's, like, you're almost trusting the other person enough to have this experience that you're not gonna remember perfectly.
Ooh, I really like
Oh,
that.
so then they're holder of secrets. I mean, I know we're digging real deep into this head, but that sounds to me like they're holding certain secrets that other people wouldn't have access to because they communicated through this not oral history, but through this like
Mhm.
touch history.
And subjectively too, like it's
Hmm.
how
Yeah,
the
yeah.
I think once again, like I don't know if I'm getting too lovey-dovey on this, but the intimacy of it, the fact that you are trusting this person to take your message that you're giving to them at
Hmm.
however they perceive it instead of how it would sound and be recorded and be replayed.
My game of telephone by hand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
really cool, and it just kinda also reminds me of, like, when you go to see a fireworks display and you see all these people recording it, and, like, alright, first off,
Oh,
you're never gonna
Mm.
watch that recording again.
never.
Like,
Yeah,
Right,
you're
right.
never gonna watch that again, and
never.
B, you're missing out on the spectacle because 'cause you're trying
Yeah,
to, like, frame your shots and shit, and it's like, no, just be in the moment.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's how I feel. Older I get.
Yeah. Is that what it is? God damn it.
Yeah, that's what it is. Curmudgeoniness.
Well, speaking of you being a curmudgeon, Danielle, what is your first tenet?
Excellent segue.
um, I have one that works very well with yours, but I'm gonna go with the other one right now. So I have as written, it says the government has created a massive surveillance network by attuning to the tones of the crystals worldwide.
Ooh, spooky.
Sounds familiar.
Because it sounds like there's this neural network of, I guess, the ones that have perished, like the remaining crystals.
Mhm.
So that just seemed to naturally lend itself to being exploited.
Yeah, yeah. It seems very easily exploitable.
Hmm.
And, like, what range of technology were you imagining here? 'Cause, in the prompt, it says, like, the modern world, but doesn't really
Hmm.
specify,
All
our
modern.
current modern
Yeah.
technology or more advanced or whatever.
Yeah, like I didn't have in mind a particular level of technology, but the
Mhm.
distinction when they said modern versus some past, it made me think that there was the way things were and then the way things are, and that it seems that in the modern times, the prompt says that there's technological derivations from the way
Yeah.
that they've evolved. So I wonder, even if let's say this were set in like the 15th century or even no, let's say like medieval period, like turn
Mhm.
of the millennium kind of time. I could see it being that versus 200 years difference. So it's not like that versus like, oh, it's 2024 kind of deal.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I don't think it matters where it's set in my mind. I think that there's a governing body in the Senate that's using the crystals for surveillance in some way.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say with the modern spec, it doesn't have to be a one-to-one to our modernity. Is that a word? But I definitely think culturally, though,
Yeah, there's a modernness to it. Yeah.
and understanding
Mhm.
of the world in general. And I assume this world follows the same physics that we're using for the most part. So like
Mhm.
besides if magic's involved or not, we haven't got there yet. But yeah, like I would think that to go back to Courtney's tenet, the fact that there is this monastic or this group that removes themselves from that
Hmm.
Mhm.
worldly kind of international scene, I think it works well with that. So with yours, DQ, is it like an Illuminati thing? Is it a specific like major city state or ruling body?
I wanted to leave it open because this quote unquote government could be as small as like a coterie or of wizards or something.
Mhm.
Like it could be a small group that maybe has power. Or if we are putting it in some other, like let's say it was like a modern day thing, then sure, it could be like a city or state government kind of deal.
Mhm.
Like I think it'd be flexible.
Are they the only ones that can see?
Maybe they're the ones who developed this technology.
Yeah, like, could they use that technology to be able to see? Like, if they're putting together, like, a
Oh,
Oh,
neural network.
yeah, they're Geordie LaForges. They got the little visors.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like, they have access to basically an infinite number of people's memories, and, like, they
Mhm.
could use that to kind of suss out the geography of the world.
To map it, right?
Yeah,
With
exactly.
audio.
Yeah.
Mhm. I mean, this goes back to what John was saying about the art of your monastic cult,
Yeah.
because we were talking
And
about
not a
what
cult,
how
not a cult.
not
Not
a
a cult.
cult.
No, no, no. A
Well, we're talking
sect.
about
A
like
sect.
how do we appreciate the actual awesomeness of their art, right? Well,
Mhm.
perhaps by having visualized the landscape, this order, whether it's a government or whatever, using all the audio, they can see what the art actually looks like.
Oh
Mhm.
man. You, Sorry, I just had that mind exploding moment. I'll keep this really brief because I don't want to go on a tangent. But the Radiohead album Kid A?
Mhm. Yeah.
I wrote in my head a whole like thing, like to kind of do a Pink Floyd The Wall version, with the Wizard of Oz, like make a movie and then put Radiohead album over top it. And
Mhm.
it literally is like this concept of like the governing body keeping everyone in the right place, and then there's this offshoot of people just trying to live life, attuned to the world
Mm.
itself and not to each other. And it fits perfectly. Sorry, a weird
Mhm.
tangent, but my head was just exploding. I had to get it out of it.
No, it's interesting because, like, so would you take it as this governing body is restricting the people?
I would think that it's definitely not in the people's favor. It's in the
Yeah.
society's favor. Like, it's like they're removed from the day-to-day life of people. They're the elite,
Okay.
they're the billionaires. And they're playing their own game amongst themselves.
They're the reptilian deep state.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Always comes back to
Yeah.
that.
Running their underground pizza shops.
Wow.
Yeah. As our podcast gets taken down.
I mean, it's fair. I did say surveillance, so that's not a good thing ever. So,
Yeah, it's usually a negative connotation there. Yeah.
yeah.
But I do like the concept that it's, like, letting them literally map out the world and its
Mhm.
geography and, like, maybe discover land masses that they haven't been to yet because the neural network is, like, resonating in some way or whatever.
I guess it raises questions like, what's the physical setting of this? I mean, we haven't done all our tenants yet, so
No.
No, no, we're
maybe
only
I should
halfway
ask
through.
that question. Yeah, I should ask that question yet.
No, that's a good segue. Back to
Yeah.
John for
Okay.
your second.
All right, so I'm gonna need a little help fleshing this one out because it's just coming to my mind now. Religion in general, I think, would be a weird thing because, as we all know, most religions are based on someone telling us what happened in the past.
Mhm.
And in this case, though, we have a perfect recollection of what happened in the past. So I would think
Mm.
overall that this would cause people to be more atheistic.
Yeah, and, like, skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would think besides your sect, not cult, that you're talking of,
Totally not a cult, no.
not a cult. I think that they actually do embrace, and like I like the idea of like Buddhism or like Taoism. Like it's not
Mhm.
like a necessarily like a deist religion. There might be more of a presence or something, or inner workings that the force basically.
Mhm.
But I would think like as a whole, society through its evolution in this world never had a religion. Like there's never a holy wars.
Mhm.
But if you remove that, there has to be conflict somehow. So like what did they fight over?
Hmm.
And that's where I'm stuck. I didn't get that far yet.
you're trying to say that the vast majority of people are not faith-based because they can trust in the validity of the
Yeah,
memories recorded, right?
not
Yeah.
in a pantheon of gods or anything like that, because there was never anyone to pull that wool over their eyes.
Mhm.
Sorry for anyone
Mhm.
that's highly religious listening to this, but it's the truth. Um, and obviously, they have found other ways to manipulate society through the surveillance and their deep state,
Mhm.
tactics.
Mhm.
But yeah, so what did people fight over, or were there fights between nations? Like, maybe everyone kind of got along and just kind of walked around with their hands out front of them so they don't bump into each other.
I would ask a question to you guys, and this is a question, I guess, for Courtney, because
Mhm.
this is her sect, her monastic sect. Is what if what if you reverse that? Because I would expect the people to be rational and trust their reality because of the recordings. But what if the culture's inverted? Like the monks are the skeptical ones who have embraced rationality and reject religion, whereas and that is their religion. Whereas the average person is extremely superstitious, and for some reason, the
Mhm.
way the memories are makes them faith based. So it would be the opposite of what we expect
So yeah, how would that, like, what would be the thing?
to make them think that way. Yeah.
Like, was there visitors or something?
Visitors. Always comes back to aliens. But, like, since they can't really rely on their sight, maybe that plays a role in this superstition?
Hmm.
Well, so maybe, okay, we can dig into this, I think. So, thinking that somewhere in their past, through their evolution, they did have sight, right?
Mhm.
And so maybe there are recordings from that early history of them talking about certain things,
Mm.
but because
Uh,
now it's gotten so far through the generations and the eyesight has deteriorated, there's like, so maybe there's some lost crystals. It's like basically the kind of like how Mormonism works, where it's
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, this one guy looked into a bag and he saw all these writings that only he could read, and
Uh-huh.
that's like how this, like, only these people could see.
mm,
Well, an audio it can be perceived as kind of being untrustworthy in the sense that it's like this game of telephone. Like as things are passed down, perhaps like the average experience, cultural experience, is that the crystals it's what the person heard from their perspective, right? So it's
Yeah,
different
mhm,
than
context.
say something written down that doesn't require well, I guess things written down require interpretation. But if you record something, right? Like and we're all seeing that thing, we're having essentially the same experience. Sure, there's some things we may notice that others don't. But with audio, there's another degree of interpretation. Like you've got to understand the tone of what they were saying and were they implying something with their voice? And so perhaps their
mhm,
culture developed in a sort of way that was more about subjectivity, interpretation, and intuition. Whereas
mhm,
had you had a society where they didn't have audio at all and they just had to rely on what they saw, what was written, or maybe what they could touch, they'd be driven to more rationality because it's more objective from their perspective. Like maybe that's the divide. But I don't know if you would want your monks to be that kind of religion, you know?
I honestly, like, didn't really have anything solid in mind for, like, what they believe, so I think anything could work. I basically just wanted it to be, like, a more of, like, a philosophical thing than, like, a we
Mhm.
believe in this one
XYZ.
god. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just keep their Taoists in my head. Like, they're not like trying to push their beliefs on
Mhm.
anyone, and they don't like believe that other people are doing it wrong. Like, I feel like they're
Yeah.
just like, nope, this is how we do it, and our life's happier this way. So cool,
Mhm.
leave us alone.
Yeah. Another thing with the prompts, the one tenet that they had given was, the crystals carry the memories, but not the personalities, so
Mm,
maybe that also ties into, like, the interpretation aspect, like,
Ah.
you can hear the remembered audio of something, but you don't really have the context of, like, who
Mhm.
these people were deep down.
Mhm.
I'm just picturing like some very pivotal character in history, ancient history of this world, that was very sarcastic.
Yeah.
Oh god.
And like
Yep.
just
Yeah.
recorded like all these things and like these sacred
Yeah.
texts. He's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, sure, yeah, we're supposed to be good unto each other. Yeah, that's right. Like,
I mean, to that point, I feel like I wanna throw out my other tenant and create one on the spot that I think would serve this really well.
Yeah.
So, what I'm thinking is I had a tenant that had to do with, like, some crystals are small away, who cares, right? So this sounds more interesting. What if, like, alongside the audio tracks they hear, and things they're actually hearing of other people speaking in their own monologue to what they're saying to people, that it also records a memory of their internal monologue.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought was I thought that was part of it. No.
You mentioned that. I picked up. I thought that would be cool if perhaps it's like reify it, like the crystal. When you look at the audio tracks, you've got everything they've heard, right, and
Yeah.
everything they've spoken, but then you have a track of what they were saying to themselves.
Yeah. How they
Mhm.
interpret it.
Their internal monologue. It's not their personality, but it's literally
Yeah.
what they're saying.
Would it be separate tracks, or could we have it like mashed together as one single
Oh, it's
Yeah.
chaotic thing? Yeah.
yeah. It's not a matter of like literally listening to it. You're hearing a mixture of their internal thought. That's why it's not objective, because
Yeah.
it's being interpreted by the actual listener in this case.
So so say if I was like reaming you out right now about something,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I'm like, Daniel, you do way too much cocaine and you stay
Right.
up way too late.
Way too
So
late.
while I'm saying that, you'd be recording that, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
would also be on top of it recording
Yeah.
how
Yes.
you feel and like, no, I have a lot of work to do. I need to. You don't know, and you drink too much
Yes.
yourself. So what do you?
Exactly. And so then that's why it's so hard for historians to say, like, okay, well, is that actually what he heard? Or did he hear in his mind like it being more harsh because he was his track on top
Yeah. It would also like put more emphasis on the role of the people who are going through and listening to these
of
things
it? Hmm.
back. Like maybe it's like a skill that they pick up of like being able to hear, okay, this is this person's actual speaking voice versus this is their inner monologue. Like there's something a little different about it that they can start to pick out, and that helps them interpret things better. But obviously like for a casual listener, it would all sound like it's mashed together, and oh wow, these people are just like having this bizarre fight where one is saying horrible things to the other, but the other's not
Hmm.
responding to that, and so on.
Exactly.
It does say this effectively gives them perfect memory of everything they hear, but it doesn't say what happens after they die. And a third
Mm.
party is privy to these crystals, or obviously you can somehow extract the information as they resonate with each other to form the type of neural network. But so I almost feel like that could be like you're saying, like to tile this in, that could be the game of telephone there. Is that even though
Yeah.
they're recording it and
Hmm.
during their life they have perfect memory of what happened from everything they hear. But then when they're gone and you have their own personal narrative tied into everything that they've recorded as they live their life, that kind of skews what happens.
Yeah, because I was just looking for a way to make like the audio unreliable. That way we
Yeah.
could take
Yeah.
your idea of society being mostly rational and flip it more society. I mean, I guess are you okay with that? Because I'm
Yeah.
flipping it, making everyone's
Um,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
It's
no,
inverted.
I said I was coming in pretty loose on the thing. I just
Yeah,
and I think what my tenet is that religion is decidedly affected by
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 this.
Mhm.
this,
Got
and so it could be. I'm fine with going. I'll let you off this one time. Like, um,
it.
but yeah, I think it would work that way too, and that it's there's almost a you know what? Actually, all right, let's take it a further step. There is like a deep schism in the history of these peoples that have created, a century-long war or centuries-long war or
Mhm.
hatred or feud because of a misunderstood conversation
Mm.
that happened between like maybe even like a love triangle or something that like happened and everyone takes it out of context or takes the wrong. I mean, it's basically religion. You look at the Abrahamic religions and like they're all worshiping the same God, yet they all hate each other. What?
Mhm.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that that definitely works, and I guess it's kind of funny that you were asking about war before, and it's come up again because my second tenet was that war is extremely taboo because
Ooh.
it it impacts people so deeply. Like if you think about PTSD in the
Yeah.
real world, you experience something horrific and that sticks with you, and you have to, go through a long process to sort of work through it. But in this world, you can't like ever, dull it down. That memory is always with you
Mhm.
100% perfectly. You will always remember exactly what was said or the sounds of battle or the screams, and like it's always going to be in your head. You can't, push it aside. You can't not relive it because it's always going to be with you.
I like that. I mean,
Mhm.
it's horrible. It's horrific.
Yeah, yeah.
but but I like the concept. What what if there was a like cast of people? Like maybe they didn't have war on large scales because of this, because like the populace gets so fucked up. So
Mhm.
what if there's like a cast of people that are basically sociopaths that can deal with those horrors and like maybe thrive off of it? And that's like maybe like war is fought on a smaller scale.
Yeah, like more assassinations and like sabotage type
I
stuff.
was thinking like gladiator type thing where you have
Oh,
like people that actually
yeah.
get off on like the screams of pain and horror and stuff like that. And that's like, they basically are unfit for society except for this.
It sounds like a faction to me.
It does sound like
Well, I would think all factions would have to have their own to survive, right? Or maybe they just have robots. I don't know.
No, that could be interesting. It's like a lot of like trial by combat type stuff where
Yeah.
like you choose a representative for your side and you let them duke it out in this limited site combat.
Yeah. Oh, that
Yeah.
could be really
Which would
cool.
be brutal. Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. That's funny. I hadn't thought that at all as like a side effect of my tenant, but I think it does work really well.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to have conflict resolution some way, right? And
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
obviously we could do it peacefully, but what fun is that?
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. So let's do a quick recap of everybody's tenant to make sure that we actually incorporated them all fully. John, could you start us off there?
Okay. So the my first tenet was that because they rely so much on auditory cues, that over time and the generations, their eyesight has dwindled, effectively leaving them to be somewhat like mole people. They don't live underground necessarily,
I mean, we could have like mole people dwarves.
though. Ooh, now we're talking.
One opportunity for mole people
Yeah,
dwarf.
with Rob
You
not
know
on
what?
here.
They're mole people dwarves now.
All right, they're dwarves. Excellent. I feel like we incorporated the low eyesight pretty
Yeah.
well. What about you?
Mhm.
All right. Oh, I'm satisfied with that.
Okay, cool.
I don't wonder though, like why? I guess that's the only question. I mean, it's a question I guess that Sunny doesn't really have to answer, but I would want to know if perhaps this were expanded, like why did they develop that way? Like why audio only? Did something happen that messed up their? So that would be a question.
Mm.
I think that in prehistory, or not prehistory, or maybe prehistory, and we figure that part out. But that they eyesight became less reliable
Hmm.
because they focus so much on hearing because they're able to store those memories perfectly. It became something that they didn't need as much anymore. That makes sense.
But it would make me wonder, like, I guess I push the question back further. It's like, why did vision become unreliable? Like, did some event happen that made things you see untrustworthy? And that's what I wonder. That's a question that could be answered by the setting.
Maybe it's just like RAM, like there's so much being pushed into their
Oh,
hearing, and like maybe just as the crystals themselves evolved for one reason or another. Yeah, I don't know what would be the deciding factor or the overall like nature of the world.
so maybe there was overloaded, like it became a super TikTok society, and they were like totally overloaded by marketing and visual media that, what was perhaps a one small religion of rejecting the visual became like a worldwide thing. And then over time, they kind of abandoned vision entirely, and that these crystals started to develop like as a technological, I don't know, side effect of for so long having been connected to machines. That could be one way to do it.
Mm,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to think of like not being able to handle so many processes. Like you put
Mhm.
so much emphasis on hearing and the memory of that and the perfect memory of that you start to lose other senses. And just my immediate thought went to eyesight because we as humans our worlds are built around our vision.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I mean, I could live with that canon.
I think that makes sense. Like it's almost like you just start paying attention less to what you see because you realize that your hearing is more accurate as to what's going on.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like dogs, like their eyesight isn't fantastic because
Mhm.
their noses are so great.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that's how they build their world. So that's what led me down that path.
Mhm. I think that works. My first tenet was the religious sect that
Yes.
basically only communicate non-verbally in order to live a pure life in their eyes. And I think we definitely fleshed that out a lot with the like textural art and things like that.
Mhm. Well, what's interesting too about them is they're almost if we go with the idea of like in the distant past there was high technology and like
Mhm.
overload and they decided to get away from vision. It's almost like the monks are a third stage reaction, right? So
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
they're rejecting the overload of subjectivity that comes with looking at all these memories or listening to all these memories. So they're taking a step further back, you know?
Mhm.
No, I really like that concept, and for some reason, I still get a little like teary just thinking about these monks holding
Mhm.
hands and like
Aw.
how beautiful and peaceful their life must be, and how
Yeah.
rewarding. And
And passing down secrets by touch, like
yeah,
Mhm.
inviolable truths that cannot be tainted by subjectivity, which they believe to be true, but perhaps they're even wrong, you know?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And Daniel, your first son?
Mine was about the government that is using the neural network for surveillance.
Okay. And I think we definitely talked about that a decent amount. They're still sort of lurking in the shadows, which I feel is fitting for
hmm
a
hmm
secret government surveillance thing. I'm thinking that we can do more of that in whatever twist we end up with in
Yeah.
a few minutes.
If no one could see, though, would they be lurking in the shadows or like in like a
Insight.
room with a lot of
Yeah, that's fair.
fans? You know?
Yeah, a lot of
White noise
fans.
machines
Oh,
everywhere.
that's interesting.
Yeah,
Their stealth operations would have to involve being disruptively loud,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
Well, that's
crazy.
the same. That also you could like assault people with loud noises.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I also wonder if we could tie it back to perhaps his origin. Like maybe they're looking for quote unquote, maybe they're searching for something that is from the past that could
Ooh.
help them. And it would end up being
Mm.
a visual thing. And perhaps the monks, the fact that they create this art using the neural network to be able to quote unquote see, perhaps seeing the art reveals something about the past that's important to
Mm.
them.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting. I like that a lot.
Yeah. It's like you're sort of discovering an ancient ruin or something that you were
Mhm.
actually, like, living on top of this entire time, you just couldn't see it.
Yeah, like, and it could be like that their goals are simpler, like the kind of goals a nation state would have, like either more power
Mhm.
or more money or whatever. But perhaps in order to achieve their goals, they need to be able to see something from the past, like a symbol
Mhm.
or a thing that the only way to see it is to learn how to see. And so they use the neural network to map everything out, and then they're able to see the art that the monks are producing, which perhaps contain those symbols.
Yeah. I like that image a lot.
Yep, I'm down.
Very cool. Um, John, your
Yep.
second tenant?
So my second tenet goes towards the religion of the world as a whole, and
Mhm.
this I think I went through a couple of iterations, but
Yeah.
basically where what we landed on is that the majority of the people are very superstitious because of recordings made in the distant past that are misconstrued.
Mhm.
Correct? That's where we landed.
Yeah, because, like, you can't quite understand the person's personality, and also their inner monologue
Yeah.
is kinda confusing everything.
It's like it
Mhm,
was basically like an argument between several different pivotal
Mhm.
figures in the history of this world,
mhm.
and people they side with different narratives, and
Yeah.
that's what has created these religious factions, so to speak.
Mhm.
Got it. And there's a fundamental unreliability because of that. And that it seems like that's an expression of that unreliability. That historical event
Yeah.
demonstrated why their narratives are unreliable.
Mhm.
Now, does the deep state, do they are they manipulating this? Are they like
I think so.
is
Yeah.
there one
Mhm.
Illuminati for the whole world, or is it still faction based?
They could be one of the factions potentially, you know, or they could be like moving between them, maybe. I mean, they
Mhm.
could be maybe they're like the anti monks, like they're a
Yeah, that's what I was
similar
wondering.
type,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
They might be, because if the monks are about reason and getting to the truth, then perhaps they're hyper religious. Like they
Mhm.
fervently support one of the two speakers.
Yeah. I
I
like I
see,
like the
yeah.
concept of having these 3 aspects where you have, like, this
Yeah.
elitist class, like the one percenters, whatever. You
Mhm.
have the mass populace, and then you have those that reject everything and are
Mhm.
just trying to, like, live life.
Yeah. I could go for that. So maybe they're like the opposite in every way to what the monks are about. So
Perfect.
yeah, there you go.
That makes it easy, yeah. And then Daniel, I think you went next this time?
Yeah, I just piggybacked when John's tenant came up that there is an internal monologue that's also captured, and that's what makes it hard to disentangle because
Yeah.
it's overlaid on top of everything else they're hearing.
Yeah, and that feels pretty integral at this point.
Yeah, and that creates that game of telephone, right?
Yeah. And then my second one was that war is very taboo because of the severe PTSD type impacts that it has on people, since they
Mhm.
can never escape those memories once they've heard them. And John, I liked your concept for like trial by combat type stuff, where a side picks, a single representative to duke it out with another person in an arena type setup, so that it's the people actually taking part in this violence are very limited to the ones who enjoy it for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's that they're just broken beings to
Mhm.
begin with that aren't fit for society beyond this role. Which I realized at first was like, oh, I wonder if like people would watch this as a sport, but no, that probably would work against the whole concept because then that'd be stuck in your head too.
Yeah, that's true.
Or you can't watch it, listen to it,
Yeah, they basically just, like, shut these guys into a soundproof room and walk away and then come back in an hour.
see who comes out.
Yep.
Oh, I love
Uh,
it.
yeah. Alright, well, with everything out there, and I think we incorporated everybody's ideas really well, now let's, fuck it up with a twist.
Sweet.
Alright, so the twist for our setting is going to be, um, the world is underwater slash in the ground slash under magma, etc.
Okay.
Mole people.
Well,
I know.
yeah, that certainly makes it more,
Uh-huh.
literal with the mole people, mole dwarfs.
I mean, you could also go the aquatic route too, but I don't know if I
Yeah.
like that as much.
I mean, you can easily push it into an unaware post-apocalypse in the sense that they've gone underground because of some cataclysmic events, and
Oh,
so whatever
yeah.
war, the trauma is still with them, and also perhaps they were very high tech back then. And that's what polluted their minds with
Ooh,
visual imagery.
Yeah,
what if
yeah.
this kind of ties everything in? I think there was a previous civilization that existed that went to war and went crazy, and somehow during that they augmented their physical selves to have better memories, but they
Mm.
like totally fucked up the world, had to move underground and kind of start over. It was basically a reset of the world. And
Oh.
now they still this augmentation has been passed down through the generations. So it's still like it started off as something that would be implanted, but somehow the
Mhm.
body
Mhm.
adapted to it and just started creating it
Incorporated.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that makes sense. So it's like, we can keep it kind of fuzzy in that there's some
Yeah.
cataclysm, but also that the nature of that cataclysm seems to be like the height of, I don't know, like what you call it, like perceptive pollution, like the height of taking
Yeah.
in as
Mm,
much
yeah.
experience as you can because of technology, and then perhaps like a war that because of all that perception, like input, constant influx of information, like traumatically poisoned our species as a result
Yeah.
and merged our technology with our brains.
Yeah, it's like a ultra hedonistic society or something, to the
Yeah.
point where they were damaging their psyches. Yeah, I like that.
Mhm.
Interesting.
And it could have been that, like, in during that conflict, there's probably like a small breakaway faction. I'm thinking, like, again, like the leftovers, right?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
the ones that dress in white, they've kind of
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
detached. Like it could be like a small faction like that, that after the remnants of the war really became society.
Mm.
Not the monks, they would be like the average people who believe in the memories. They have to interpret the crystals and they have the neural network they're building. Whereas the monks are
Mhm.
the ones who are like, no, there was a truth before this. There's a reason why we've abandoned sound.
Have the
Mhm.
monks moved to the surface?
Oh,
Ooh. Oh, that's a cool take on it, because usually you would
yeah.
think about it the other way, like, the monks are
Mhm.
hiding underground.
So what if they ruined the world, forced underground, forced to start over society again,
Mhm.
built nations underground because the surface was ruined, but over centuries or millennia probably the world has healed itself
Mhm.
and is now reusable because you see what happened when we went on lockdown for a couple of months and like all of a sudden like there's fish in Venice, like it was weird. So imagine if you're gone for centuries if not
Yeah.
millennia,
I like that.
Yeah. Mhm.
and then the monks are actual bat people.
They could maybe feel the sunlight, like they could
Yeah.
feel the outside world,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, that's cool.
And the government faction that's like we said was using audio to map the world, perhaps by being able to map the world to be able to see the landscape out there. and that's
Oh,
about
Yeah.
control,
and
you know?
they're
Yeah.
suppressing. They don't want people to come out of their holes,
Exactly. 'Cause they're religious.
so they know the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Mhm. And the art that the monks are making must be an affront then. It must reveal something that's problematic.
Yeah, I wonder if the art, like, incorporates parts of the old civilization somehow,
Mhm.
or even, like, the landscape itself
Yeah.
on a much larger scale.
It could be the way back to having all of your senses again
Oh,
by
yeah.
learning that.
Yeah.
I was trying to think if there's a way that using like the textural art, because you said that like normally they create it from their own vibrations that they feel, and
Mhm.
that's beautiful to them. And then we said that like maybe if you were a casual observer actually looking at it, it looks beautiful. So I was
Mhm.
trying to think how it could there be some way or something that they're doing that it starts resonating into those that are still being kept suppressed.
I mean, could it be that what they reveal through their art can reconnect parts of the crystal in their brains to give them all their perception back in the end? Like
Okay.
it's the instructions or the code that would unlock what's been broken.
Okay, yeah. Just trying to absorb
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
thought.
there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh. 'Cause it seems like we've got a dynamic where you've got, monks above ground. They are trying to get to objective truth through tactile stuff and reaching into
Mhm.
the past in some way. Their art has something to do with the past. We've got people underground, unaware of the situation, of the true truth of the past, but they have their, audio memories. They're kind of, interpreting them as you would in a religious society. And then an
Yeah.
ultra conservative sect that's like, we can't let them get out of their holes. We've got to keep them
Mhm.
focused on the mythology. And we can see using this neural net that the monks know part of the truth because their art is expressing it.
Yeah. Maybe it's like the monks are, yeah, trying to learn what exactly happened to cause this end, this
Mm,
apocalypse scenario, and like trying to prevent another one. Maybe they
Yeah.
fear that the direction that this underground society is going is gonna lead to another explosive apocalypse type of
Yeah.
event, or like destroy maybe the underground world or something.
yeah.
So are the monks trying to hide themselves from the elitist oppressors, or are they trying to wake up the rest of society?
I guess it depends on how secretive the oppressors are. Like if they're fully a, secretive group that controls everything,
Yeah, you wouldn't know.
yeah, then the monks might not know. Then I imagine they are trying to warn people below, maybe through like something vibrating the earth so that the people below can like feel it or something.
Oh, maybe they're the
Ooh,
only ones who are aware of this cult.
Mm.
what if they work through agriculture? They're trying to have roots go down into the people. Like they're
Ooh.
trying to as part of their art, maybe, or maybe not part of the art, maybe it's separate. But I'm just trying to think of like ways that they could contact the people without actually going down to them.
Yeah. It's almost like a reverse bonsai kind of thing. Like they're
Yes,
Oh
tending to
yeah.
these trees or these massive plants to
make them
get the roots
big.
to grow down.
Yes.
That's cool. That's very cool.
I do like the dichotomy if that the monks may be the only ones who have perception of this cult, religious, super religious cult that's manipulating things, and so they're
Mhm.
trying to wake people up, one at a time, slowly.
Yeah. Yeah. By showing them below that there is life on the surface, we can kind of make it whole again and we can go experience sunlight again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like the idea that also so going back to the kind of art thing, but not as a physical media, but as an auditory medium. Maybe they like tap on the trees, like percussive like
Oh
that, so
yeah.
it travels through the root system. And that's like part of how they communicate when they're not in hand contact with each other.
Mhm.
They have
That's
like
cool.
this system of like knocks and whatnot that they do. So
Yeah.
it kind of comes back to the echolocation thing as well, but then
Mhm.
translates to the mole people because they would feel the vibrations through the earth and the root system.
Yeah, I love that.
I do like the idea of them as well physically going down there, perhaps in secret. Like maybe they,
Okay.
they can't let their presence be known, but I do like the idea of them moving among the people in a way that has to be super secretive. Like in addition to using perhaps the roots to like communicate on a broader scale.
Mhm.
I'm thinking like, you've got the guy in the brown monk habit sneaking into a crowd and it's a very loud and boisterous cloud, but the way he makes contact with his secret contact is by touching them. They feel like,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, this is the monk, and then they reveal the truth to them because they don't want to speak since they're silent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that works with what we had talked about before of like using the intimate sign language to talk
Mhm.
to people without any recording being done.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know they're there. You can't see them.
Yeah. You just feel them like quote unquote say something to you for like a second and then they're gone.
Hmm. Yeah, you could say something like, "Oh, look to the roots," or something, and then that person knows to communicate with them in the outside world
Yeah.
through the plants or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we definitely have our factions built out already. We
Oh, no.
somehow ended up with a couple different factions, so that works out well. And then for like a main quest, would it be, these monks trying to create a revolution?
I don't wanna lose sight of the fighters either, right?
Well, so
Mm.
I go back towards a love story that there's a monk has somehow made contact with someone in the world below, and they're like you said that they move through these masses already, but I feel
Mm,
like there's still some unattainable nature between like there's got to be a difference between the monk sect and the general populace, right? Like they have to have
yeah.
some sort of understanding besides their devotion.
Do you mean physically or in terms of not knowing them?
Well, I'm just saying, like, what if the monks are moving about these people?
Mhm.
Like, what keeps the people from just joining the monks in the outside world?
My take is that there's not a lot of monks and there's a whole lot of
Okay.
sheep. It's
Yeah.
like
Okay.
you're trying to wake up like the whole of the world, and that's tough,
Yeah.
you know?
So, can we do like a Neo type thing
Yeah,
where
that's what
like
Mhm.
right? That's what I'm getting the vibe.
yeah, one of the monks is in contact with someone that for some reason maybe that's the person that could see.
Oh.
We did just literally make the Matrix in
I
Yeah.
know, we
but with
did!
mole people.
We should have more people! God damn it.
It's the Moletrix.
The mole trick.
uh, uh.
The mole trick.
Uh,
Horrible.
I mean, it's not full on Matrix. It's delving into
Just
there.
I mean,
similar
okay.
vibes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Taking what you're saying at face value, we can make it simpler, right? The person that he's making contact with doesn't need to be necessarily a Neo who has like messianic powers. We could just say this is a story of making contact with someone to wake them up and to give them a new sense of to give them the sense of sight through touch. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like this could be
Yeah.
the story of a monk making that journey to communicate that secret to wake one person up to the conspiracy.
So here's that I'm happy to abandon this, but right now I'm focused on it. I like the idea that this person they're not a messiah, so to speak, but they have something different about them. The person's being contacted by the monks or a monk.
Mhm.
And I like the idea that they have limited sight of some sort. And although it's useless in the below world because everything's dark because no one can freaking see, in the above world, that's where they can actually see the beauty of these sculptures,
Mhm.
these kinetic sculptures that have been created and whatnot. And so as a the person hearing the story, we get to experience literally through their eyes.
Could we do a hybrid of that where it's not literal sight, but they have developed a new perception that is
Ooh.
between
Mm.
hearing and
Synesthesia.
right, something like that.
Yeah.
They have synesthesia. I love that. So
Mm.
they have like maybe they got like conked on the head. They don't
Yeah,
have actual sight, but their brain translates sound in a different way.
they can translate it, and that's what the neural network is supposed to do, right? Like, they can do what the neural network does.
Oh, I really like that actually.
That is cool. Yeah.
So that would make them a target for both the monks and the religious cult.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could see them, like, not trusting the monks initially because
Mhm.
they're like, "Why are you so interested in me? Like, get away from me. I don't want all this attention."
Yeah.
While also being potentially hunted down by, like, the surveillance state.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that means that they're the beginning, perhaps. Like, if you could take the story in the direction of, like, kind of a Gattaca slash,
Mhm.
Yes.
new genetic person, and so they're the beginning of something new. So if you wanted
Yeah.
to tell, like, a slightly more, I mean, admittedly strange, but because it's mole people, but a slightly more high-tech thriller, you could do that too,
Yeah.
that way.
Or
Mhm.
you could do like a Last of Us kind of thing where,
Oh, it's true, yeah.
the monk in this person is maybe it's a younger person that needs extra
Yeah.
protection.
Oh.
And they're sending out these six random bloodthirsty warriors that these factions have been using to
Mhm.
keep the peace,
Mhm.
so to speak, keep their people under their thumb.
Oh, to get them.
Yeah. That's a cool conceit for a main quest. Like your escort. I mean, everybody loves escort quests, but
Yeah.
but literally escorting somebody from below up to the surface and trying to dodge all these agents who have been sent after you.
And that's so easy. It takes your warriors.
Yeah.
You got them back
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I like the idea that like the who's escorting who in a sense, because the person being escorted has this magical power of being able
Yeah.
to create images in their brain, much like
Mhm.
sight, whereas the monk
Mhm.
has the magical powers of being, this non verbal society that they look at everything in a different way, or they interpret things completely
Mhm.
different than the general populace. And as they're trying to make this journey to, I don't know what are they trying to get to?
Surface.
Just get out.
They're trying to get them out. It's like Children of Men. Like get the
Okay.
child
Mm.
out. Right?
Yeah.
And when the surveillance state, because their surveillance state gets
Mhm.
word of this, that's when they send in their warriors.
Yes. Who we'd established are immune to the trauma, right?
Yeah. Well, they're sociopaths.
Sociopath.
Yeah.
So the
They
monk,
get off on it. They're sadists. Yeah.
I bet the monk being very tactile, they probably also practice a lot of physical arts. They're probably also like badasses, like hand-to-hand
Mm.
badasses, so they can
Yeah.
fight the warriors, the trauma warriors.
Trauma warriors.
I love it.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
I
I
want to play
really
this
like
game now.
I know, right? It sounds fun. It sounds cool. Got mole dwarves and monks and
Trauma Warriors 3
Tra-
Darkness.
The Trauma 6 coming for you.
On that note, I think we're going to wrap it up there. So again, thank you to Sunji for sending in this prompt. We hope you like where we took it with mole people and trauma warriors and all that. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in as well. Remember, if you'd like us to build your worlds, you can visit worldbuildwithus.com, click the send prompt link, fill out the form, and within a reasonable-ish amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Let's Worldbuild. But if you'd like a cozier place to chat with us directly and meet other members of the community, we'd love to have you join our Discord server with a link for that in the description and on our site. And of course, if you're feeling particularly generous, you can shower us with money over on Patreon at patreon.com/worldbuildwithus. And in return, you'll get benefits like early access to episodes, patron exclusive episodes, which John was just on one, 2-part world builds for prompts that you submit, and more. So check out the full list over on our Patreon. And a big thanks to all of our patrons for your support and input. And that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.